What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 4, Thursday Night Football.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
Okay, in this video, I'm going to give you my top picks for the Thursday Night Football Showdown between the Miami Dolphins and the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, let's take a look at this NFL Showdown between the Miami Dolphins and the Cincinnati Bengals. So at the quarterback position, I like Joe Burrow from the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Joe Burrow has averaged 21.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 62% owned, projected at 20.9 fantasy points here tonight. He's 9,600 DraftKings salary. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Bengals favored by 3.5. So Joe Burrow has scored 23, 17, and 26 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he got 5, 4, and 6 rush attempts in those games. So I love the matchup. I like the rushing upside. So I like Joe Burrow here versus the Miami Dolphins. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So stud on the slate, I like Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals, and Joe Mixon has averaged 13.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 19.3 rush attempts per game and 6.7 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 72% of the snaps, gonna be about 52% owned, projected at 16.6 fantasy points here tonight. He's 9,000 DraftKings salary, and Joe Mixon has scored 7, 11, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games from 12, 19, and 27 rush attempts on top of 7, 4, and 9 pass targets. So this guy's getting monster volume. So I like Joe Mixon here versus the Miami Dolphins. Now for the Miami Dolphins, I think you got a couple of options here. Take a look at Chase Edmonds. He's averaging 10.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.7 rush attempts per game and 2.7 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 53% of the snaps, gonna be about 25% owned, projected at 10.4 fantasy points here tonight. He's 6,200 DraftKings salary, and Chase Edmonds has scored 16, 5, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 6, 5, and 12 rush attempts on top of 1, 3, and 4 pass targets. So not a ton of volume here. It looks like the Dolphins have been splitting carries, but I do like Chase Edmonds here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. So the other running back for the Dolphins, if you want to save some salary, is Raheem Mostert. And he's only averaged 5.4 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 8 rush attempts per game and 2 pass targets per game. So about the same touches as Chase Edmonds. And he's on the field for 51% of the snaps. Going to be about 20% owned. Projected at 7.8 fantasy points here tonight. He's only 4,400 DraftKings salary. Raheem Mostert has scored 1, 11, and 4 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 8, 11, and 5 rush attempts on top of 2, 3, and 1 pass target. So I think this is a good salary saving option here. Raheem Mostert's got some monster upside if he gets the carries. So I like Raheem Mostert here versus the Cincinnati Bengals.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, who do we have at the wide receiver position? So a couple of studs on the slate. Actually, we got 3 studs on the slate here. So the first one is Jamar Chase from the Cincinnati Bengals playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the 7th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Jamar Chase has averaged 18.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11.7 pass targets per game. Also averaging 1 rush attempt per game. He's going to be about 46% owned. He's on the field for 95% of the snaps, projected at 17.9 fantasy points here tonight. He's 11,000 DraftKings salary. Jamar Chase has scored 14, 11, and 32 fantasy points in the first 3 games of the season off of 10, 9, and 16 pass targets on top of 2, 1, and 0 rush attempts. So I like Jamar Chase here versus the Miami Dolphins. Now for the Miami Dolphins, you have Tyreek Hill. He's averaging 22.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.7 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 75% of the snaps, going to be about 52% owned, projected at 17.7 fantasy points here tonight. He's 10,800 DraftKings salary, and Tyreek Hill has scored 5, 45, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 4, 13, and 12 pass targets. So I like Tyreek Hill here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. So the other stud for the Dolphins is Jalen Waddle. Now he is questionable, so keep an eye on that injury news. But Jalen Waddle has averaged 26.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 74% of the snaps, going to be about 44% owned, projected at 16.8 fantasy points here tonight. He's 10,200 DraftKings salary. Jalen Waddle has scored 18, 43, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 6, 19, and 5 pass targets. So I like Jalen Waddle if he's a go here tonight versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now if you want to save some salary at the wide receiver position, take a look at T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's averaging 12.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.3 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 56% of the snaps, going to be about 45% owned, projected at 15 fantasy points here tonight. He's 8,200 DraftKings salary, and T. Higgins has scored 14, 19, and 5 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 7, 10, and 2 pass targets. So I like T. Higgins here versus the Miami Dolphins. Now my favorite player on the slate is Tyler Boyd from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's averaging 14.2 fantasy points per game on the season only getting an average of 4.7 pass targets per game, but he's been super productive off of those pass targets, and he's been on the field for 77% of the snaps, going to be about 23% owned. So I think he's going under-owned here and underpriced at only $7,000 DraftKings salary. He's projected at 10.3 fantasy points here tonight. Tyler Boyd has scored 24, 6, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 5, 2, and 7 pass targets. So I like Tyler Boyd here versus the Miami Dolphins.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, moving on to the tight end position. I like Hayden Hurst from the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Miami Dolphins, they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So he's got a fantastic matchup. Hayden Hurst has averaged 6.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.7 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 66% of the snaps, going to be about 25% owned, projected at 7.4 fantasy points here tonight. Only $5,400 DraftKings salary. Hayden Hurst has scored 2, 7, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 2, 7, and 8 pass targets. So I like Hayden Hurst here versus the Miami Dolphins. Okay, now for the Dolphins, you got a couple of tight ends you can look at. The first one is Mike Gesicki, and he's averaging 5.6 fantasy points per game on the season, only getting an average of 2 pass targets per game. On the field for 49% of the snaps, going to be about 9% owned, projected at 6.7 fantasy points here tonight. He's $5,000 DraftKings salary, so this is kind of a contrarian play here because for $400 more, I would absolutely play Hayden Hurst over Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki has scored 2, 14, and 1 fantasy point in the last 3 games off a 1, 4, and 1 pass target. So high risk, high reward play here, but I think he is an option for your showdown slate. So take a look at Mike Gesicki here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, if you want to save some salary at the tight end position, this is another high risk, high reward play, but his salary does justify the play here. Take a look at Durham Smith from the Miami Dolphins, only averaging 3.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 60% of the snaps. Compare that to Mike Gesicki at only 49% of the snaps. Going to be about 8% owned, projected at 3.9 fantasy points here tonight. But the difference here is Durham Smith, only $2,800 DraftKings salary, so you can save some salary with this pick. Durham Smith, he scored 5, 2, and 2 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 3, 1, and 2 pass targets. So I like Durham Smith as a low salary, high risk, high reward play here versus the Cincinnati Bengals.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.